Today we're going to be talking about properties of parallelograms. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel. So let's mark that in our picture. We can mark AB and CD as being parallel and BC and AD as being parallel. Now, in class, I'm going to show you how to construct a parallelogram on Sketchpad. So we'll be doing that in class. There are some properties of parallelograms. In parallelograms, opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary, and diagonals bisect each other. So these are properties that we're going to be using and looking at. So let's go to the next page. Let's say we're given this figure. We are given this parallelogram ABCD, and the diagonals are drawn in, and you are given some information that BC has a length of 8, ED is 2, DC is 5, angle BCD is 70 degrees, and AC, it should say 17. Okay, is 17. Now, what I would like us to do, for starters, is to find the length of segment BE. Now remember, the diagonals bisect each other. So BD is bisected at E. Well, if ED is 2, BE would also have to be 2. All right. Now, if BCD is 70 degrees, I'm going to have us do something else now. BCD is 70 degrees. I'd like us to find angle, the measure of angle ADC. Now remember, consecutive angles are supplementary. So that means that the 70 degree angle and angle ADC will have to add up to 180. So 180 minus the 70 degrees will give us the measure of our missing angle. So the measure of angle ADC is 110 degrees. Let's move on. I'm going to tell you that this is a parallelogram. And the way we would name that is parallelogram PQRS. And we'd like to find the measure of the angles. Well, since consecutive angles are supplementary, we know that the angle with 3x and the angle with 120 degrees, if we added them together, they would give us 180 degrees. So we've now got an equation. Let's go ahead and solve it. So we'll subtract 120 from each side, and we get that 3x is 60 degrees. Divide everything by 3, and we get that x is 20. Well, so if x is 20, 3x is going to have to give us 60 degrees because 3 times 20 is 60. So this angle here is 60 degrees. Now let's think about what we know. If consecutive angles are supplementary, then angle P will have to be 120. And also, angle Q will have to be 60. Remember, another way to think of it, opposite angles are congruent. So notice the 120s are opposite one another, and so are the 60s. Let's move on. Let's say we're given this parallelogram, and we're asked, what is x in the parallelogram on the left? Well, let's think about that. In a parallelogram, we know that opposite sides are congruent. So the side that contains the x, which is LM, would have to be congruent to side NO. So in other words, 2x plus 2 would have to be equal to 40. Now we have an equation to solve. So let's just subtract 2 from each side. So we have 2x equals 38. Divide each side by 2, and we end up with x equals 19. Let's go to the next problem. What is the value of x and y in the parallelogram below? Again, we're going to use the idea that in a parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent. So in this case, starting with x, we know that 2x minus 10 is equal to x plus 80. We have an equation to solve, so let's do that. We'll get all the x's on the same side by subtracting x from each side. So we end up with x minus 10 equals 80. We're going to add 10 to each side to isolate the x, and we get that x is equal to 90. So there's your value for x. Now you're also asked to find the value for y. Well, the other opposite sides, of course, are also congruent. So we know that y plus 20 and 3y minus 4 must be equal to each other, which gives us yet another equation to solve. We want to get all the y's on the same side, so let's subtract y from each side, and we get 20 is equal to 2y minus 4. We want to get y by itself, so we're going to add 4 to each side. The 4's will cancel, and I have 2y equals 24. We now want to divide each side by 2, so we end up with y equal to 12. We have one more that we need to do on the next page. You're given parallelogram HIJK, and you're asked what is the value of x? Well, remember the x plus 40 and the 2x plus 8 together, those lengths make up the length of this diagonal. The diagonals bisect each other. So we know that x plus 40 and 2x plus 18 must be equal to one another. So let's solve this. We'll get all the x's on one side. So we have 40 equals x plus 18. We want to get x alone, so we'll subtract 18 from each side. And I end up with x is equal to 22. That's it for today. Thank you for joining me.